50. Let's go to page 158 now, please. Good morning. We're learning a special class today about the laws of Titid in preparation for Tuesday's special lecture about the laws of Techelet, which is part of the mitzvah of Tzitzit. Most commentators explain that there's two separate mitzvot. One is to put the white fringes on your garment, and one is to put the blue string mixed into those white fringes. But it comes from the same passage in the Torah, and instead of looking in the Torah, we're looking in the Shema because we recited it a few times a day in the Shema, the third passage of the Shema. Why do we put that? Why is that in the Shema at all? Is our first question. Why do we read the passage from Bamidbar 15, as you can see here, Numbers 15? Why do we put that in the Shema? Anybody? This is really a question of about the Shema. It's not really a question about the Tzitzit. Yeah, please.
Mentioning the Exodus from Egypt.
Excellent. Very good, Russell. Very good. It's a little bit curious, though, because really, where does it mention the Exodus? In the passage, where does it mention the Exodus?
Towards the end of it.
It's the last line. So we read the whole passage, the whole paragraph, just so that we can read the last line. The last line that says, I am God who took you out of Egypt. Now, this is an interesting thing, that we have to mention that we came out of Egypt every day. It seems to be a mitzvah from the Torah to remember the Exodus from Egypt every day. Some people count it as a separate mitzvah. There's the mitzvah of reading the Shema, and then there's the mitzvah of remembering the Exodus. The Rambam puts it together. He talks about this mitzvah in the context of Shema. So I must somehow feel that it's connected to the mitzvah of Shema. Why is remembering the Exodus? What does that have to do with the mitzvah of Shema? Well, what is the mitzvah of Shema? Once we're on it. We'll get back to Tzitzit in a minute, but what's the mitzvah of Shema about?
Does it go back to a very simple acknowledgement of Hashem?
Makes sense. Simple but difficult, right? It's like
it's as simple as in it's only 6 letters, but it's just so
6
much.
words. You mean? But yeah,
6 words. It's
right.
So much in 6 words.
True, and beyond that, the 2 paragraphs that we recite. But the basic idea of mitzvah of Shema is usually referred to by our sages as accepting upon ourselves the yoke of heaven. Uh-huh. So it basically, in other words, it's affirming that you believe in God, or more than believe in God, that God is with you, that you are with Him. And then we move on from there to love of God, and to fear of God, and to keeping the mitzvot, and so forth. So there is acceptance, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. Maybe connected to that is the Exodus from Egypt, because that's when we really saw God's involvement in Jewish history. He took us as a nation out of Egypt. We saw how many plagues? 10 plagues. There was a few more. It depends how you count. But so yes, the Exodus of Egypt. That's really why we put the third paragraph into the Shema. Shema usually we say has 3 passages to it. We recite them in the morning. We recite them in the evening. The first 2 start with the word Shema. What's the second one start with the word Shema? What does it start with? No. The V'ahavta is the next pasuk after Shema.
Oh.
It's part of the same paragraph. V'haya im shamoa tishmeu, if you will. So, but the concept of hearing, listening, is a common theme to both. They both appear in the book of Dvarim, chapter 6 and chapter 11, and they're very, very similar. I don't know if you've noticed this before. We'll talk about it sometime when we talk about the mitzvah of Shema and why we recite it in 2 separate passages, which seem to share common themes. Did you ever, when you were in school, learning English lit, or Italian lit, or German lit, or or Portuguese literature, that the compare and contrast? Compare and contrast, right? What's similar, what's different? So you should do that to the 2 first paragraphs of Shema. There's a lot of commonalities and a lot of differences. Maybe you'll learn something. But that's for another class about the Shema. But the basic themes are there of listening to the mitzvot and loving God, and at the end there's of course putting the mezuzah on your doorpost. That's Shema. What's the third paragraph? Well, all of a sudden we jump backwards, right, in the Torah, the order of the Torah. We read from Devarim 6 and 11. Very curiously, we go back to Numbers, Bamidbar 15. And so it's curious why we add that in. So let's say we'll go with what the Russell said, that we have to mention the Exodus from Egypt as part and parcel of accepting the yoke of heaven. Where do we see those two connected? The existence of God and the Exodus from Egypt? You guys should know this.
When you say existence of God and Exodus from Egypt, that's kind of how he announces the Exodus from the very beginning. When he says,
Where? Where?
I am,
When? Where?
Whenever he appears
Where?
in the burning bush to Moshe?
No.
No? Okay.
Close.
To Yaakov.
No.
Aram?
Say again?
Aram?
No.
When he showed up to Pharaoh.
No.
Is it whenever he parts the sea?
No.
Could you rephrase the question?
Where do we find that the God's existence and God being the one who took the Jews out of Egypt presented together as one idea, as one
There was
unit?
the calf, and
No.
Moshe getting angry?
No.
The Ten Commandments?
Yes.
Oh.
It's the beginning of the revelation at Sinai. It says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. You remember that? Okay, that's the first of the Ten Commandments. I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. So the fact that God exists is the one who took you out of Egypt. If you look in the book of the Kuzari, maybe you've been studying it in a different class, he makes a big deal of that God, when he presents himself to Jewish people at Sinai, he reveals himself, the greatest revelation ever. He doesn't say, I am the Lord your God who created the world. He doesn't say, I'm the Lord of the God who is powerful over the seas and the nations. No, he says, I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And Rabbi Yehuda Levi in the book called Kuzari says, this is because the revelation, the actual experience of God is so central to our belief system. More central than the fact that he created the world, even though the book of Bereshit starts that way. And with all due respect, that God created the world, that's an important thing. The fact that God took us out of Egypt is part and parcel of our acceptance of God. So that's, I think, Russell, you're in the right direction. That's what the Gemara says. We have to mention the Exodus of Egypt, maybe as a completion of the theme that we accept God as in Kriyat Shema, and that's why we recite the third passage. But it doesn't only end with the last line. What does it say before the last line? Before the last line, we have the mitzvah of tzitzit. You had a question?
But God didn't say before, like, I will take you out of Egypt.
He did, but the presentation, I'm the Lord God who took you out of Egypt, really puts them together. It's primarily in the revelation at Sinai.
Moshe to say to Israel, the same thing, no?
Oh, of course, God introduces himself many times. He mentioned that I'm God and I will take you out of Egypt, but stated as one sentence, as one package, as this is my definition, I'm Lord God took you out of Egypt. I think it primarily, it stands out that that's the beginning of the Ten Commandments. I assumed you would all jump at that as first, but you got it in the end. It's okay. It's good you got the cogs moving, clearing out the cobwebs. Good morning, good morning. You have your coffee?
That's what they're doing.
All right. So let's take a look at the passage and see what other goodies we get. Just on the side, I'm not convinced that everything else in the entire passage is just a freebie. I think maybe the rabbis wanted us to put that third passage in Shema, Numbers 15, not only because of the last line, although primarily that's the reason we have it in there, but maybe because of the mitzvah of tzitzit also. Maybe it's so important that we should recite it morning and evening. Yes?
Is this is Midbar 15 the first mention of Titid in the Torah?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. It's not only, it's not, interesting. There's another pasuk which is Gedilim ta'aseh lecha al arba kanfot kusutecha. I believe, though, it's in the book of Dvarim, so I think it is the first. I'll just double check here. I might have it in the book, but I'll just Google it. It's okay because before I had a special operation done, and I made a link between my brain and my cell phone. So whatever I don't remember, it remembers. It's as if I remembered it. So it's okay. It's kosher that I'm gonna look it up. It's as if I remember it.
Rav looks something up online as if he remembers it himself.
You were 10 years.
Dvarim Chavbet. I was right. Dvarim Chavbet. It's in the book of Dvarim. It is mentioned again, but the first time isn't.
Okay.
You're 10 years ahead of Elon Musk.
Okay, if you could give me just 1% of what is his net worth,
Rav, if
I'll sign the deal.
1% of your Torah knowledge.
I'm not willing to give it up
Ah.
for that 1%. I'm not. But there's such a thing called Yisachar Zvulun. You've heard of that?
Yeah.
Yisachar Zvulun. There are two of the tribes, and the Torah describes how Yisachar, they were the wisest people. They were the scholars, and Zvulun were the merchants. They did trade on the seas, and they had a deal because Zvulun felt bad. He's so much busy and is always traveling for business. He doesn't have the time to be the greatest Torah scholar that he would want to be and to involve himself in this holy matters all the time. And so he said, "I'll make a deal with you, my brother, and I will provide for all your needs so you can keep studying." Sachar continued to study, and he was supported. The first kollel, the first arrangement where somebody's learning full time and didn't work at all, and you give me some of the merit of your Torah study. And so Yisachar would study and Zvulun would support him. And so to this day, there's an arrangement that some people, they make this arrangement. They feel so bad that they can't study, and they feel I'm going to get some part of the Torah study by giving my support. And they actually have a contract you can sign. Two individuals can sign. One rich man and
counterintuitive. Is it for someone to say that they don't have any time to study Torah, but they still go out of their way to try to buy off the mitzvah. I feel like there's some hypocrisy.
Yeah. What do you say?
They don't have time to study full time.
So what's the catch?
Okay, full time.
They're still studying.
So they're still going to study Torah themselves. So you can't pay someone to put on tefillin for you, right?
Okay.
It's your arm, it's your head. You can't do that. So you can't pay somebody to study Torah for you either. But you get additional to your minimal Torah study. He's doing Daf Yomi Zvulun. Okay, he's still doing the daily study. But the additional investing in the mitzvah, he's getting a portion of a share in the other guy's extra Torah study, if there's such a thing as extra. But I do agree with you, Moshe, that it goes against the grain of the whole concept of this Torah is you do the best you can. You don't have to do beyond what you can. If you're a merchant, that's what you're doing. Everybody has their lot in life, and if your lot was to be a merchant and his lot was to be a scholar, so then everybody's doing the right thing. Don't think you have to feel bad necessarily, but I can also understand the other side of someone saying, I really want to.
When they it's as opposed to say giving $10,000 to a big Knesset, it's nice when they have the programs.
So there's a specific person that's learning because of your money. You know where your money's going, and it's actually supporting somebody who's a holy man, right? I'm actually secretly kind of hoping that this is what's going to happen with my son. I have a son who's getting married in 3 weeks. 3 weeks today. I mentioned this before, and he chose his own path. He believes, he knows that he must support his wife when the time comes, but he doesn't really have any interest in matters of this world. Any interest whatsoever. He's really, that's why I'm so happy he's getting married, because he's going to have to be involved somewhat in this world. But he's such a holy tzaddik, and he's learning all the time. It really, he's a phenomenon. He learns in Tveria with Rav Dov Cook most of the time. Yeah. He also became a chassid of a Rebbe, an additional Rebbe to Rav Dov Cook, also Rav Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern in Yerushalayim. So he's, we're buying him a shtreimel for his wedding. So he's as they
Rob
say,
start wearing a strong
he's gone off the derech. in the right, the right direction, or the left direction. So they say your kids are never going to be exactly like you, either. The right of you, left of you, who knows? But so I'm proud of him. But he believes it, and he will provide for his family as best as he can. But if someone would offer him a Yisachar Zvulun partnership, I think that would be a good thing in this case. For his situation, where at least for a certain period. I don't know for the entire life, but who knows? Who knows? I'm not looking for it. In the meantime, we're going to help him out, and I don't know. Somehow it's going to work. They have minimal demands and needs, so they're very dedicated, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Good morning. Good morning. So back to the mitzvah of Titid. I don't know how we got off on that tangent to Yisachar Zvulun. I don't know. I can't even retrace the steps to that one. But it's okay. The mitzvah of Titid. Numbers 15. Let's read it. And maybe you know how to read it in Hebrew. Does anybody know how to read it with the... Do you know what those fancy markings are in the Hebrew on page 159? It doesn't appear the entire book and all the Siddur, but only in this section in particular we have those. You see circles. I see squiggly lines.
They're like cantillation signs.
Exactly. They're called the cantillation marks in English, or in Hebrew, or in Yiddish. It's actually Yiddish, I believe. The trop. It became an English word too. Trope. The trope is a certain pattern. So this is a pattern.
I think that comes from like European music.
Yeah, maybe from Europe. I don't know. So it must be Yiddish, yeah. Which means, so the cantillation marks serve a number of functions. It goes back to over 1,000 years old. It's not as old as the Torah itself, but it gives you the sing-song tune that you're supposed to read the passage in the Torah. Right? When you look at the Sefer Torah, it doesn't have nikudot, it doesn't have the vowelization, and it doesn't have the musical score. Now, what this musical score does is gives you the music, but it also gives you the punctuation, and it also gives you the pronunciation, because the musical note is always on the emphasized syllable, the syllable which has the accent on it. So it's very good to help you learn how to read. Sometimes you don't know if it's mila'el or mila'ra. Do you know those words? Mila'el means the accent is above, meaning at the beginning of the word. Most Hebrew words, as opposed to English, most Hebrew words, you can assume, if it's not otherwise, you can assume that most Hebrew words are milera. Milera means that the accent is on the latter part of the word, the end, the last syllable. Okay, so let's take a look. Va-yomer is an exception. You see that under the vayomer, there's a little curved, what would you call that? It's called a mercha in the official terms, but I'm not going to teach you all the names of them now. But that's why we know that it's not vayomer. It's vayomer. Okay? Hashem el Moshe. How do you know it's Moshe, not Moshe? Because it's under the shin. You see that same little mark, that same little curve? It's called a mercha. So it's Moshe. Lemor. It's not Lemor. It's Lemor, because there's a line underneath the mem. You see that line, straight line underneath the mem? There's another cantillation mark that you all are familiar with, and that is the completion of that straight line under the mem. What is it? The two dots after the resh. Those two dots after the resh, they comprise something called the sof pasuk, the end of the sentence. So as you can see, that's how and why each sentence is separated by, we would call it a colon. It's not a colon, right? It looks like a colon, but it's one of those cantillation marks which tells you this is full stop in British English. Full stop, right? Who can read it for us? Does anybody know how to sing it? That's the Ashkenazi version of that's called a Gershayim. There's a name for each note, and there's a tune, how it goes. And there's a different tune in the Sephardic, Yerushalmi tradition, Yemenite tradition. There's different versions of I once participated in a lecture. There's a fellow who's a scholar who is a musicologist, and he claims to have reconstructed the original tune, not the Ashkenazi, not the Sephardi, not the Yemenite, but the original tune going back 1,000 years old. I don't know how exactly he did that, but musically he did that. Like something to do. It's like a chant. Closest, I think, is the Yerushalmi tradition, but we're not Karaites about this either. Even if we can reconstruct through archaeology or through whatever methods, if we can reconstruct what was 1,000 years, doesn't mean that's what we do. We do what our fathers did, what our grandfathers did. We keep on a tradition. Yeah.
Isn't that why there's like slight controversy about adopting a blue string for tzitzit?
Precisely. That's correct. Some people say, okay, great, you did you went to the lab and you found some old snails and you found some old threads that have the blue color and you could tell this is this and this is this and it must be true. So what? Our religion is not, we're not, geologists. We're not archaeologists mining to find what was the original, blue string. We have a tradition, a living tradition. We practice Judaism as a lived religion. And so that's why some people say, I don't care about whatever studies you've done, prove it 100 times over. I'm going to put on tzitzit the same way my father put on tzitzit and the same way my grandfather tzitzit. And we haven't put on the blue string for over 1,000 years. Over 1,000 years. Because the tradition was lost. Why was the tradition lost? Why did we stop putting on the blue string?
You couldn't get the dye.
Probably it had something to do with the Romans made it forbidden for anybody other than the royalty to wear the royal blue, the blue special dye that came from the snail. And that's why there are other rabbis who disagree, and they say, we were forced to stop keeping the mitzvah of the Torah. Now we can rediscover it. Why not? And what do you have to lose? But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We're a very conservative religion. Orthodox Judaism is called Orthodox because we stick to our traditions. But we're very conservative. I mean, with a small c, not reform and conservative movement. We're very we're I wouldn't say afraid, but probably it's also true. We're afraid of change because in the last 200 years, there's been so much change. There's been the Enlightenment movement and the Reform and the Reconstructionist movement, all sorts of movements of all sorts of people that are decided that we have to change Judaism because of all the new science and the new society and the new conditions. And so we have to change. And so they changed without any qualms and without any respect and without any, basically disregarding our entire halakhic system, which has kept us alive for 2,000 years. And so whenever you see that someone's making a change, we have an allergic reaction to change. And that's a healthy thing, but it's also unhealthy. You don't want to be living with allergic reactions, right? You want to be able to deal with it. And we do. So we have a system to deal with change. It's a question, I was saying this to someone else yesterday, because he was writing down what I was saying. So you mean to tell me that the Torah changes? It's one of the principles of the 13 fundamentals of faith, bringing us back to our previous lessons. What is principle number 9, I believe? This is the Torah that does not change. So of course, I have to toe the party line and say this Torah will not change. And it's true, but it becomes a question of semantics. Because what do you mean? What did the way we keep Shabbat today, does it look like the way we kept Shabbat 300 years ago? They didn't have electricity. They didn't have a plata. So our life changed, so the way we apply the Torah changes. But you can say it without getting anybody nervous by saying, no. The Torah is eternal and the Torah remains as it is. we apply it differently in all the different situations that we come across. But it's the same Torah that we're applying differently. Fine, 100%. If that makes you feel better, that we don't say the C word, change, then, and it's important. It's important to recognize that you can't just say, oh, I feel like it. I feel that this is wrong. I'm going to change what the Torah says. You can't. The Torah is eternal values which were given to us. How we apply them, that's what Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's what the rabbi's job is, to apply it appropriately in each and every, with every challenge, with every era, with every change in society. We're going to use the same values, the same laws, the same principles, and apply them to the new situation. So you want to say that, oh, that means that the halacha changes? Yes, of course the halacha changes, but you can't say that because then everybody will accuse you of being reformed, right? Right? Everybody will think that you're going against the ninth fundamental of the Rambam's fundamentals of faith because the Torah never changes. So but I think you understand what I'm saying. The Torah doesn't change, but the Torah does change. The way we apply the Torah, the way we apply those eternal values and mitzvot and laws, it of course is going to change because the situation changes. And the way we keep Shabbat, as I said today, it looks very different than the way it was kept even 100 years ago, let alone 300 years ago. But the way we live in cities which look different. We live in houses that look different. We live in everything around us looks different. And so, of course, Judaism looks different, because Judaism is a living tradition. It's alive. So we can do all the archaeology we want. That's not necessarily that we're going to now go back to what was 1,000 years ago. Now, the key point here, and I'm going to take your question in a minute, Moshe. I'm not ignoring you.
No,
Okay.
You already answered.
Okay, good. Sometimes that happens. The key point is that there's a mechanism of halachic change. And so those movements I was mentioning before, many of them just throughout the entire halachic system, they say, well, it just does not apply anymore, and forget it. We say no. We're going to keep to the books. Put our nose even deeper into the books to make sure we understand in the most refined way what the principles of the halacha say, and then we're going to, within the mechanism of Torah, whatever within the rules of engagement, as it were, to use a different frame of reference, we're going to battle the battle of Torah and apply it and argue about it. Of course, there's lots of arguments. Some rabbis say a plata is no good. Some say a plata is good. Some say this kind of plata is good. There's many different ways, but it's all within the halachic system of argumentation, of derivations, of the way we treat the former opinions and everything. There's a lot. It's for another lesson. But getting back to our topic, but you're absolutely, Hanan, your senses were absolutely on the spot here. This issue of whether or not we can reinstate an ancient mitzvah which was lost, not because it's forbidden or anything, just because it was lost. The tradition was lost about how to make this blue string. That is still debated today. That's why most rabbis, I think, don't wear the blue string.
But it's in the Shema.
But it's in the Shema. It's so central. It's such an important mitzvah. And we're going to talk more about it now, a little bit, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. If you tell the Jew, you shouldn't fulfill this mitzvah because your father didn't fulfill this mitzvah, to me, if you're talking about Titid, it's the exact same as saying to a secular Jew, well, listen, you shouldn't keep the Shabbat because your father doesn't keep the Shabbat.
That's interesting, but that's a little different. Because everybody knows that the people that they were not doing that as a fulfillment of their Jewish practice. They were doing that as they distanced, been distanced from their Jewish practice for whatever reasons.
Distanced from the practice of Titid.
Yeah, but not on purpose. That wasn't part. This became part of our Jewish practice to wear tzitzit without Titid. So. I think I've told you before. I wear techelet, so it took me a while, many years as I was becoming a rabbi. I did not make the change because I'm naturally conservative, and we're trained to be conservative as halachists, as rabbis, as poskim. But over the course of time, I at one point, I don't know, I'm sure there's psychological elements involved as well. I did make the move, and I think that it's justified, and I'm thrilled to be able to participate in this mitzvah, the renewal of such a mitzvah. It's not necessarily connected to Zionism at all, but it's the same sort of muscle. We were never able, for thousands of years, we weren't able to keep the mitzvah of Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. We never had the opportunity. And now we do. So I think we're fulfilling a mitzvah by having Medinat Yisrael. And some people say it's a mitzvah therefore to go vote because and to go to the army, protect the Jewish people. We never had the ability to have an army before. But it's a mitzvah in the Torah, it's on the books. So reinstating old mitzvahs it really touches upon it, that even though they're separate mitzvahs, they're not connected to each other. This whole concept of reinstating mitzvahs which didn't apply for thousands of years, it has a parallel in the Zionism, those Zionistic type of mitzvah, national mitzvot, and the mitzvah of Tchelet, although there are many Haredi rabbis who are not Zionists, but they put on the Tchelet because they're convinced that this is the original Tchelet and we can do the mitzvah that we didn't have the ability to. Yeah, Yaakov.
The reason why a lot of Tolani religious Zionists, Rabbi, don't work Tchelet is because of the validity of the Tchelet. That's the argument.
I think most listen. There's many arguments. I can't cover them all, and there's going to be a whole other lecture about that, and you'd have to ask them really why they. But the most cogent, the most impressive argument, in my eyes, is this idea of tradition. That we haven't been doing it, and we have to stick to the traditions, and we're conservative, and we don't want to make changes unnecessarily. And we live in an era where people making changes are going off, leaving Judaism before long. After you start, doing things that are different, it's a slippery slope. So that I hear that argument. As I said, I dealt with it. In the end, now I'm on the other side of the divide, and I do put on Tchelet. But I can understand there's a serious issue that you're changing what was the custom. But I think if you're careful about it and you know what you're doing, and it's not that big a change. let's be serious. A blue string or no blue string, there are bigger issues to argue about than putting on the so. Okay, that's my decision, but I definitely hear the other side. There's all sorts of arguments which slowly but surely are becoming silly. Like, people think that you don't know for sure that that's the right snail, or all sorts of arguments that they don't hold water, in my opinion. But maybe some people that didn't do the research and they came to different conclusions. Just like in medicine and in physics and in chemistry, there's different opinions. So there could be different opinions about this Tchelet, whether this group that's going to come tomorrow and give the lecture, whether they got it right or not. You could argue against them scientifically and historically as well, and halachically as well. You could say that maybe there's halachic arguments as well. But I think the major one, the one that I think is the real issue, is what I was saying about before, the change to tradition. Yeah, other questions? Yeah, Amos.
I have a question that's connected with yesterday talk about following majority, like more people, like.
Yes.
How where is the key? In which cases we follow the bigger group and which not? Like, this is a good example because more people are not wearing the.
Right.
But is there any?
Right, it's a good question. The answer is that we don't apply that rule, that we have to follow the majority unless we're in a court of law. A Beit Din.
Okay.
So I was saying yesterday, that traditional explanation that in a Beit Din, when you have, 35 against 36, and, if the court is 70, if the court is 23, so then, 11 against 12, whatever it is. You follow the majority, and then there's rules. If it's a majority to find the party guilty, so then you have to more than one. But so the original context, even though I did mention that I believe the Torah is giving us a principle that the majority should be followed, and that comes to bear somewhat on this issue. If you're making a change, how can you you're a small group of people that are making a change, you're in the minority and we should follow the majority. But it's not a halachic principle that you have to always do what the majority does, except in the context of the Beit Din. That's where the actual obligation stands. And then there's, it is applied sometimes to communities, to, you have to do something on behalf of the community, you should follow the majority. But it's not a very defined halachic mitzvah that you must always do what the majority does. If everybody likes wearing square glasses, you have to wear square glasses. No. If everybody likes you have round glasses. Oh, but you're in the minority. Most people don't have round glasses. You're allowed to do things when you're in the minority. Nobody ever said you have to be a conformist on everything in the world. We'd all be the same. God wanted to have a little variety in the world. Yeah, Amos.
That means that if it's not said that we should wear white tzitzit, that we can.
So we're going to learn about the rules. There are. Was my plan, and we're still going to learn about some of the laws of the tzitzit. There's today. There's tomorrow morning also. Sat Hashem. Unfortunately, tomorrow I can't make it. I have another meeting and I can't change. But you'll have another teacher hopefully.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Yeah, I'll be back for the other class, but for the first class I have a meeting I can't change. I'm very excited actually. I'll share with you. It's not a secret. Many of you know I've started an amutah, and a nonprofit, an organization to help converts after the conversion. A lot of people are involved with getting people through conversion. Right here, we're doing that. We teach people in the conversion process. But there's no, believe it, I was shocked to find that there's no organization that helps them afterwards. Whatever types of help they need, whether it's joining a community, sometimes some financial aid, sometimes finding a job, finding a shidduch. There's all sorts of issues that when you don't have the natural connections, you're coming from a different culture, different country. Anyways, so we're trying to get some rabbinic support for our organization. And tomorrow I have a meeting with Rav Usher Weiss. Rav Usher Weiss is a well-known, perhaps one of the greatest rabbis of our century, of our generation. And he lives in Ramot, not far, and I managed to get a meeting with him. But he doesn't make meetings in the afternoon. I asked a number of times. But so I have to go meet him at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So I can't be in two places.
Bring bagels.
I should bring bagels to Rav Asher Weiss? Oh, that's a nice idea. I hadn't thought of it, Moshe, but who knows? Maybe he'll be hungry. Okay. What do you think? With two rabbis meet, what do they have? They have bagels. I understand your thinking. And lox, of course. Bagels and lox, right? Exactly. So maybe we'll bring him something.
You know how you make a kosher BLT? Bagels, lox, into Finland.
Oh, nice. Any case, so as soon as that meeting's over, I'll come back, but I don't think I'll make it back for the first class. Beseder, so the laws of Titid. What are some of the laws that are written in stone and that we can't just make stuff up? You asked about the white, about that. So the first thing to talk about is the mitzvah in general.
It's 4 sets of 4 strings, and in each of the sets of 4 strings, one of those 4 strings has to be longer.
Good,
Yes.
good. What else do you know? That's a good start. What else do you know? You said white.
Threads.
Right, white. The thread.
5 knots.
8 threads, right? From 4 strings, they go through a little hole in the corner and they come out as 8, right? Because on either side. So it's 8 strings, and you said 5 knots.
Yeah.
Okay, what is 5 and 8?
13.
Which is?
600.
What's 13? Oh, 13 fundamentals of faith. What else is 13?
13 attributes.
13 attributes of mercy. What else?
There's a lot of 13s in the temple.
In the temple?
Yeah.
What's 13 in the temple?
So one thing was, I believe it was whenever they would sift the grain on Shavuot for the grain offering, that they would sift it through 13.
13 sieves. Nice. I like it. What else?
13 tribes if you count Menachem.
13 if you count Levi as well as Menachem Ephraim. Good. Yeah. What else?
613.
Well, that's 613. You're still missing 600 though. But we'll get back to it. It's coming. Don't worry. What else is 13 in the Torah? Thought the first thing you'd mention would be, I guess not all of you said that. Come on, Moshe, you had one.
Oh, the bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah.
Oh.
Bar mitzvah. Yeah, you become of age when you turn 13. So that it's a very Jewish number, 13. 5 strings and 8 knots. 13 is also the gematria of the word ahava. Love. So it's all the mitzvot we do. Where are the laws of tzitzit? In the Rambam's books, 14 books. Do you remember?
The 13th book.
It's not. It's in ahava. Excellent. It's in the second book called. First one's Madah, second one's ahava. Expression of God's love. Hanan's been learning something. There you go. Oh, it's cheater. He has it open in front of him. The table of contents. But okay. So tzitzit is an expression of ahava. I like that. Okay. It's also, by the way, the gematria of echad. Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Shem echad. 13 gematrias. And you put achad together with ahava, and you get 26, which is the gematria of the name of God. Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Kei. It's 26. 13 times 2 is 26. In any case, okay. So what else do you know about the tzitzit? Laws of tzitzit. 4-cornered garment. Good. Jewish men. Good.
It's supposed to be a reminder of the mitzvah.
Excellent. That's what it says here. Let's read the text. And
You have to wear them at day.
you have to wear them in the daytime. Why in the daytime?
It's additional.
Why not at nighttime?
All right.
The mitzvah is only in the daytime. That's why women are not obligated. You said men, because women are not obligated in all mitzvot aseh, which positive commandments, which are bound to time-bound commandments. So this is bound to time because it only applies in the daytime, not in the nighttime. Why does it only apply in the daytime? Good, because you have to be able to see it. We're so used to that we can see at night because we have electric lights, and it's
It mentions in the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You
Hanan, go ahead.
Why do some people sleep in tzitzit?
Good question. I had a friend who slept in tzitzit, and he explained to me why, even though there's no mitzvah in the nighttime. He says, yeah, but I don't always wake up at the crack of dawn. So for those few moments when I'm still sleeping at the end of my nighttime sleep, when the sun has risen, or even before that, dawn has come, and the mitzvah of tzitzit is applicable, I want to be fulfilling the mitzvah at all times possible. So even when I'm sleeping, when I wake up, I'll have the tzitzit. But it became a little bit of a uniform also. I think just this is a Jew always has tzitzit on. It reminds him of the mitzvot. So you always want to be aware. So yeah. Someone else wanted to say so.
Talit, we shouldn't take talit on evening, isn't it?
Correct. We don't wear the talit at night.
What is the reason?
Because the mitzvah is only in the daytime. It's a daytime mitzvah because you can see the strings and be reminded of the mitzvah, as we're going to see. Only when you can see them. At nighttime you can't see them. So, yeah.
We can't walk for more than 3 months without the tzitzit.
I don't know of any halacha that says that. I think that's a mistake. I don't think that's true. You are allowed to walk around as long as you want without tzitzit. You don't really have to put on tzitzit at all. Turn it off. Turn off the tape. Sorry, you heard it here.
I know it says
It doesn't say that you have to wear tzitzit anywhere. What the Torah says, we're going to read inside, it says, if you have, if and only if, IFF, the mathematical, formulation. If you're wearing a garment that has 4 corners to it, most of our garments don't have 4 corners. So if you're not wearing tzitzit, you're not violating any law. We obligate ourselves. We make a garment especially to have 4 corners so that we can then, if you have a 4-cornered garment and you don't put on the tzitzit, then you're in violation. Even if you're not walking at all. Just wearing it for one moment, if you have a 4-cornered garment and it doesn't have the fringes on the side, you're in violation. So, but if you're not wearing a 4-cornered garment, you're not obligated. So one second, one at a time. Everybody's waiting. Renan is waiting and Moshe's waiting. We'll do Moshe and then Renan. Sorry?
Scarves.
It's a good question. Some people say that's a problem.
You should put on.
I know some women will cut
But what do you want to do if you want to work out this problem? If you want to know if this is a problem, what should you do? This is important. This is important. You have a good question. Yes, it's a four. The scarf is good. Where should you look if you want to know the answer? If this is halachically allowed or not? The laws of tzitzit is one answer, not a bad answer. But I want it, and this is why it's important to me. I want to introduce you to a second source of authority. No, not the Talmud. You don't the paskin from the Talmud. Who do you think you are? You're going to read a line in the Talmud? It's been 1,000 years since the Talmud. There's been rabbis telling you what the law is based on the Talmud for 1,000 years. You can't go back to the Talmud and say, oh, I read a line in the Talmud, I'm going to practice that way. That's not the way. We look at the halacha based on the Talmud, but the halacha is on the laws of tzitzit. There's different books that bring the laws of tzitzit. One other source of authority, very important, I want to teach you. Yes, Russell, what do you say? Not bad, but the Rav, usually that's equivalent just to opening up a book. Yeah. Shulchan Aruch is one of those codes of law, the laws of tzitzit. What's another source? What did you want to say? No? Shulchan Aruch, no. You go to a community of God-fearing Jews who keep the mitzvot, and you see what the practice is. Very important source for knowing what the halacha is. So, the scarf that you pull out your scarf again. Want to show everybody the scarf. In almost every community of God-fearing Jews, people wear scarves. Put it around your neck, and you're going to see people wearing scarves. People wear scarves all the time. Religious Jews, they're wearing scarves. So you can assume they asked the rabbi. They looked in the books, and for whatever reason, whatever the reasoning is, this type of scarf, we're not obligated to put on tzitzit on. It's very important because the truth is, if you just look in the books, it's kind of hard to justify that this if it's a garment which is wide enough, which it has the dimensions and it has four corners, and you put it, you wrap yourself in it. Why not put tzitzit on it? A bigger question is a shawl, right, or a kimono, or this type of poncho. If it has four corners. But the common custom is that we do not put... Yeah, that's a good question. But the common custom is we don't put tzitzit on these types of garments. And that's an important halachic source for the practice. Now, it's not without question. There's some rabbis that feel you should put tzitzit on, but they're in the minority. I think it's a strange opinion. I'm going to go around. Everybody can ask their questions.
Has not been answered for a while.
Okay, which question, Moshe?
My question is, I believe it says in the Mishnah, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you have to wear tzitzit from the time when you can discern the difference between the strings with techelis and without.
You are wrong.
I'm wrong. Okay.
Yes. The Mishnah that you're quoting, it talks about the laws of Shema. And for some reason, the Gemara points this out, that for some reason that Mishnah in Brachot makes a link between two separate mitzvot. One is the reading of the Shema, and one is...
Well, we're linking these two mitzvot.
That's probably why. Okay, but they are different mitzvot which are linked. They're linked. And so it says there that the earliest time that you can say the morning Shema, the Shema when you get up, is when you can distinguish between the blue thread and the white thread. The Tosfot says that the blue, it refers to the threads of the tzitzit, not just a ball of wool, which Rashi says. But it's a machlok. In any case, there seems to be a link between these two mitzvot, two separate mitzvot. It doesn't say that you must wear tzitzit ever, let alone from the first moment that you can see the distinction. It was referring to the mitzvah of Shema. The Shema you have to say every day, whether you're wearing a garment or not, a four-cornered garment or not, you have to say the Shema regardless. The Shema, but what's the earliest time you can say Shema? When you can see, when there's enough light. It has to be in the time when most people get up, so that's the Gemara and Brachot. But that's answering your question. Renan, you've been waiting.
Yeah,
that was a part of that. Oh, very good, very good. And Amos, what's your question?
If I have two garments, like a tzitzit poncho, then
yes,
all of them need to have a tzitzit? Or
if you define, you go to your rabbi or you go to the books, and you go to the other source of authority. If you get to the conclusion that the poncho requires tzitzit, so then you would wear two sets of tzitzit, your tzitzit that you wear under your garment, and So you can have more than one pair of tzitzit. As a matter of fact, I mentioned my son's rabbi that he studies with, Rav Dov Cook in Tveria. He wears numerous pairs of tzitzit.
How many of it?
I don't know.
Depends on how his emotional state at the time.
It really depends because it's all optional. It's not Once but you obligate yourself. The more garments that you have, four corners, the more obligations you have. But if most poskim say the ponchos do not require for tzitzit, but it is a question, and so you'd only have one. But you can have more than one pair of tzitzit. Yeah.
Your process for
Good question.
the conversion, I can wear tzitzit.
It's a good question. I've been asked this before numerous times.
Right?
The question the question was, can someone who's in the Gur process wear tzitzit? To you, it's obvious that?
Of course.
Yes,
Of course
yes, of course you can. Okay, what's the question? Right, the question comes, I believe, from the tefillin. There is a common custom that the converts do not, when they're in the process, before they finish conversion, they don't put on tefillin. Tefillin are one of the three big holy ritual objects. Tefillin, Sefer Torah, and mezuzah. Those are stam. We mentioned this before. That they are objects. It's considered to be holy objects. It's not just Judaica. You go to the Judaica store, anything that has Magen David on it makes it into the way that the Judaic store. Somebody draws a Magen David on a stone, so then that's Judaica. But that's not a halachic holy object. These specific mitzvot they're considered to be holy objects. So the tefillin, there is a custom. Some rabbis suggest that a convert doesn't have the holiness of being a Jew yet, so he shouldn't be putting on these holy objects. It's almost like a come down somehow, that it's inappropriate for somebody who's not Jewish, who doesn't have a brit milah. He shouldn't be wearing these holy objects. And from the tefillin, I think a lot of people make the jump to tzitzit. But the truth is, they're wrong. I think, my opinion, I agree with David. I think that there's no difference from the tzitzit from shaking a lulav, or listening to the shofar. Can a non-Jew hear the shofar? Sure, it's a mitzvah. Every mitzvah, and he should be training to take on as many mitzvot as he can, to be practicing, to be ready to commit to keeping all the mitzvot. So I say that yes, a convert can and should wear tzitzit. By the way, just to completely you answer Amos's question, I wear 2 pairs of tzitzit every day.
Yeah. The morning.
Because I have one that I wear all day long underneath my shirt. That's called talit katan. And then when I daven shachrit, I put on a talit gadol. Ashkenazi custom is only married men put on the talit gadol. Sephardim is from the age of 13. So you have 2 pairs of tzitzit at the same time. You have the talit katan and talit gadol, a small talit and a big talit. Okay, another question. Yeah, please.
Announce a question.
Yes.
I just had my first interview for the LinkedIn, and they specifically asked me since when I wear the tzitzit and chelet. So.
Right. You don't know what answer they were expecting though.
Okay.
It could be he would be put more at ease if you said no.
Since when I wear the
tzitzit.
Well?
Since when? Ask me since when I wear the tzitzit.
Yes, Moshe.
I remember I needed my tzitzit to be washed, so I left them in a bucket with a little bit of soap and water, and I forgot about it. And my roommate texted me, "Moshe, you forgot your tzitzit." I said,
Okay.
Could you take them out, string them out, and hang them up?
Okay.
And he said, okay, sure, fine. And I remember he specifically told me, because this was my roommate who's a ger who hasn't finished his gior. He reminded me when I came back, undo the knots just a little bit and retie them, because I may have accidentally like pulled onto the strings. So he was reminding me to pull onto the strings because he's not halachically Jewish yet. So there's the tying of the strings as well. It has to be by a Jew, correct?
Correct. Every mitzvah has to be done by somebody who's obligated in the mitzvah. If a non-Jew is not obligated in the mitzvah, he can't tie tzitzit. Now, what your friend said was a very big chumrah. Very big chumrah. because the last knot out of the 5 knots is not what qualifies it as a kosher tzitzit. It was kosher even if that knot would have totally been undone and done by a non-Jew. But it's based on a true principle that the tzitzit have to be tied by someone who's obligated. But that was just a little... People get all sorts of ideas of extreme stringencies. But it's very sensitive of him to tell you that. I don't think it was a problem in the first place. But yes, Amos.
My question is, if one of the string fell down, someone told me that I should behave with that, like going to put it in the special place, not putting it in the.
I understand. If one of the strings gets cut off, so that's also wrong. That's also wrong. Yeah. It refers to what we said before, and that there's a concept that holy objects cannot be thrown out into the trash. Yeah. They have to be buried. It's called geniza in Hebrew, or in English or in Yiddish, it's actually called shemus, which is just an Ashkenazi way of saying shemot, the names of God. Because if you have even a piece of paper where you write down the name of God in the original spelling, there's 7 names of God that you're not allowed to be erased. So you can't throw them in the trash. You have to just bury them. There's no way to destroy them. So that's a category of objects which require geniza. Geniza means putting away. They're required to be put away, and ultimately they're buried.
I remember that from grade school.
Seamus.
I do remember putting tzitzit strings that I wrote into Seamus. Yeah,
it is the common custom, but I don't think it's obligated, because tzitzit is not one of those holy objects. Again, tefillin are, mezuzahs are, and if you have a chumash in which they wrote the name of God, then you have to dispose of them in the halachically kosher way by putting them in the geniza. But tzitzit, I don't know if you noticed, it doesn't fall under any of those categories. It's not tefillin, it's not a Sefer Torah, it doesn't have the name of God on it. Like any other, what do you do with your lulav after Sukkot? You don't put it in the geniza. Some people wait. That's a nice thing. They use it to burn the chametz 6 months later. Yeah, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to. What do you do with the leftovers of the wicks of Hanukkah? So everything that was used for a mitzvah, once the mitzvah is no longer applicable, they don't have holiness anymore. You don't have to put them in the geniza. You're not supposed to show them disgrace. I wouldn't put them in the with the dirty diapers in the trash. What I do is, what you're supposed to do is you wrap them, you put them in a plastic bag, and then put it in the trash. And that way, at least you're keeping some semblance of respect. But it is quite common that people don't know the difference, and they put the talit in the geniza. It's a big problem because there's just not enough burial space for everything. Well, Amos, you finish, and then I'll take Renan's question, and that'll be it for today.
If one string is missing, is it invalid all tzitzit?
Very good. I had planned to discuss those laws in today's lecture, but since we were at the end of the lecture and we didn't get to discuss too many laws inside, or we didn't go through a list of them, we'll have to leave it for another time. The short answer is there is a minimum requirement of how many threads qualify for a kosher fringe, kosher tzitzit fringe, and it requires some study. The common custom is that you have to have 4 strings, and so you have to be short 4, which become 8. So if you have one out of the 8 which is cut off, it's no problem, because you still have the other side of the 4 of that 4. But if you have 2 strings cut off, there is a chance that both of those 2 out of the 8 that are from the same string, and so you only have 3 strings. And so if you have 1 cut off, it's always kosher. If you have 2 cut off, then it depends on a lot of how much is cut off, how much is left, and sometimes you can know if it's from the same string or not. I'll tell you about it more another time, but not today, because we ran out of time.
They don't cost very much to get the
If they're
strings.
not with a dye,
Without
they don't
the
cost.
pith,
They
I mean,
don't
yeah,
cost
they're not
too
very
much.
expensive.
Yeah, that's true.
With pith,
No, but it takes time to retie them and so forth. So you have to be aware.
I do
There are many laws about exactly the minimum measurement that keeps it kosher, and then obviously if you have 5 strings, that makes it not kosher. Also, that's Baal Tosif. Now to add onto the mitzvot. If you say, oh, it's a mitzvah to put 4, I'll put 5 or 6 or 7. I'll be super holy. No, you can't do that. We said before you can put on a number of different garments. In each garment, you're fulfilling the mitzvah as it's said. That's okay. Although it's a little bit of a fine distinction. We have to stop here. People are waiting for me in the other class. But Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. See you later today is first.